Welcome to the Evo India podcast. Now, this is an episode of our Boss Talk series. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't be fooled by what you see, because the two guys I'm talking to, they are genuine bona fide bosses. They are the co-founders at Ultraviolette. So, Narayan Subramaniam and Niraj Rajmohan. Narayan, you are the CEO and head of design at Ultraviolette, and Niraj, you are the CTO, Chief Technology Officer. Welcome to the Evo India podcast.
Thank you for having us over. I think you've had a very interesting conversation with Narayan last time. I'm thrilled to be here as well.
Yeah, so Narayan, we had a conversation about the development of Ultraviolette, how you started off, your personal journeys, which actually is very inspirational, and I genuinely am a big fan. In fact, you guys should watch that podcast later on. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. But in this podcast, we'll dive into the brass tacks, into the business side of things. You guys are here in Pune, Evo India's home, to launch your second showroom outside of your home market in Bangalore. So that means you guys are on an expansion spree. It's been, 2 years since you delivered your first motorcycle?
I think a little over a year. So last March was when we delivered the first set of motorcycles in Bangalore. Last April was when our first hangar experience center went live in Bangalore. And now we're here in Pune with the launch of our space station in central Pune.
So who is the av geek amongst the two of you?
It's both of us.
Okay,
that's something we share in common.
Yeah. Everything is aviation themed.
Right.
Your bikes are on the road, but everything is aviation themed. You've got your new motorcycles, the Mark II, as you call it. Your motorcycle is the F99, obviously, again, aviation inspired. Your hangar, your space station. Yes. Where does that inspiration come from?
I think both of us are actually quite geeky about that. So Narayan, for example, has been into aero modeling since I remember the early days in school, right? And I have been into drones and quadcopters for quite a while. In fact, I attempted in 2009 to start a company and trying to build autonomous drones and quadcopters. So both of us have this background which has something to do with aviation, and it's always been there since childhood.
Okay, so I'm going to try and pull myself back from this conversation and talk more about the business side of things.
Sure.
Right? Your expansion, it's been slow yet steady. Is that as per plan? Are you gauging customer feedback? Or are you just taking it easy, trying to test out the water, see that you're getting everything right?
I think it's been about getting everything right. That is for sure. I think Bangalore...
the intent is to do everything right in terms of design, technology, performance, and overall the user experience. When I talk about user experience, not just the way you experience a motorcycle or your after-sales side of things, it's the whole approach towards the community building aspect that we're looking at as well, right? Starts with building awareness, starts with post that you get into consideration, then you come into the stores, you look at the vehicles. Then I think we're doing something fundamentally different from what the industry is doing, where most often now with scaling or expansion comes the flip side of the equation, which is a drop-off in your customer engagement, right? Your journey ends at the point of sale. Today, historically, in the most companies that we have out there, right? And for us, it was very important that the journey, in fact, begins at the point of sale. So we're talking about a very advanced layer of customer engagement, consumer activation, community building. We've got UV Squadron, which is what we call our community, going back to your last question. Alive and kicking in Bangalore. Now it's going to scale up in Maharashtra as well. So getting every nuanced aspect of this right, from the technical knowledge of the people interacting with the consumers to the look and feel of the space. It needs to communicate futuristic, it needs to communicate aviation, it needs to communicate technology. Getting all of this in every aspect of the retail experience and communication was key to us. And I think that's where the last 10-12 months went into perfecting that. And now I think we are, like you rightly said, on an expansion spree.
Is this like a worrying time? Because it's no secret that the electric vehicle business is going through a tough phase. We all know what's happening in the car world. There was a recent report that in India, more than 50% of EV owners want to go back to combustion engines. It's the same all over the world. It looks like the early adopters have got the adoption done and the fence sitters aren't jumping the fence. What's it like in the in the two-wheeler EV space?
So I think the examples that you cited, this is absolutely true. It's been happening. And it also indicates one other thing, right? Which is product quality, right? A lot of people are excited about something new and shiny that comes in the market. But are those new and shiny things actually able to do the job that they're intended to do, right? Is it giving you that same level of ownership, excitement, the automotive experience which you were, looking for in a new product, right? And that is something that is really hard to get right? There are vehicles out there from the Teslas of the world, which, if you drive the Model S, you instantly get a sense of that, right? And the products that are very serious about, the kind of experience that they deliver, I think don't see so much of this, drop off. And the ones that are, very superficial on the surface, there's a tendency to see that kind of drop off after the initial, early adopter phase. And that's the other thing that Narayan just spoke about, right? Which is that it's not just about delivering vehicles, it's about the ownership experience that comes afterwards, right? The community building, right? The engagement that happens afterwards, because an electric vehicle, at the end of the day, you may think it's similar to a regular IC vehicle, but it's not, right? And that whole aspect needs to be fulfilling in its ownership as well.
So you brought up Tesla. Now, Tesla have dropped prices.
Right.
In India, we've seen all EVs dropping prices.
Right.
You've also got introductory offers on the Mark II. You drop prices by between 10 to 20%, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah.
What's going on there? Is that also you guys discounting? You trying to get more people to buy your bikes before then you can stabilize your pricing?
I think there's actually a benefit of the supply chain, right? It's more to do with that. If you remember, even when we started, right, it was around the time post-COVID when actually the prices of everything was quite volatile. Right, commodity prices, the energy prices, everything was undergoing this, intense volatility, and we were pretty much ended up, commercializing the vehicle when it was at its peak, right? And now things have stabilized, right? If you actually notice that all of the cell companies, the cell manufacturers, there's been an oversupply, right? Which is a good thing, a good problem to have, which the EV industry and consumers benefit from, because an oversupply of anything leads to prices coming down. And we have benefited from that, and we have actually passed that on to potential buyers as well. And I think similar things have happened for other companies as well.
But then why only the first 1,000 customers? After that, you start making profits?
I think for us, it's also about, where we begin and where we open the market. Of course, there's certain offers that are valid for the first 1,000 customers, and there are other benefits that go on even beyond that, right? There's several packages that we offer, whether it's the performance package or, the Violet AI, all of these. So it's meant to, cover multiple aspects, and the 1,000 is just for one aspect of, discoverability that we've created.
And adding to that, in all transparency, let me lay it out there. The EV industry is not yet at the same scale of profitability as the IC industry, right? We are still in a very nascent stage. So layers of margins of profitability, when we talk about it, are, we are competing with an industry that has 4 or 5 decades of building up to that point where the supply chain is so optimized that, you're able to do a certain healthy margins on every product that you sell. So the EV industry is not yet there. And I think definitely for us today, we see that happening over the course of, say, 5 to 10 years or so. But it is important to start at a point where there is stability for the company from a revenue perspective. But having said that, we are not yet where the IC industry is at, and that bridge is going to be, cover that gap over the next few years.
So how many years before you get to profitability? Are you there yet? Or
so I want to give some context to why we are in this segment.
Okay.
I think it'll set as to why we're not doing scooters and why motorcycles.
Okay, so that was my next question. So that's good. Before we talk about why motorcycles and not scooters. So Narayan, just jump in, then straight in.
Okay, so when we talk about why motorcycles and not scooters, I think it comes down to what we were talking about earlier in terms of profitability. That is one aspect, of course. Then there is the other thing of what we are good at as a company, which is building cutting-edge technology and insanely cool design on all that we do, whether it's the vehicles or the experience that we provide, right? And this being in a segment which has meaningful volumes, but also where there is customer acceptance and appreciation to design, technology, performance, and attention to detail was important for us. I mean, you see what's happening in the scooter world right now, where, a downward spiral of price points is what is being used to entice customers or increase market share. And the moment companies start going down that path, then you've forsaken everything to do with innovation and building newer forms of tech that could open up different performance or ownership avenues on the vehicles. And we are very clear that while there may be lots of companies doing that, companies have to do what is required for business. And from our perspective, our differentiator is we will always provide the best in terms of quality, performance, and design, and in what we do. And that required us to start in a segment which had, like I said, meaningful volumes. May not be the most selling format of vehicles, but it is still in India, the segments we are talking about sell 20 lakh vehicles a year, right? And that's a immediate focus market for Ultraviolette. So our approach is to get deep focused into this, get the excitement that EVs can really, really outperform other choices of mobility that you have, drive that down really strong, and then look at what else we have in store.
So, Niraj, you were talking about how Ultraviolette is closer to profitability than everybody else. Can you elaborate upon that?
Yes, absolutely. So, one of the things that you'll notice is that as you see the spectrum of, two-wheelers or even four-wheelers for that matter, at the lower end of the spectrum, there is very little room for profitability, right? You're talking about very high volumes, very low margins, right? There's a tendency to, push for the lowest prices. There's a lot of discounting in the market. And that sort of tends to make it very difficult to, make sustainable margins on vehicles. And it's even harder for electric vehicles, right? For that matter, because the prices of batteries and there's a lot of volatility in the supply chain. And on top of that, you're introducing a new technology to compete with something that is very mature and decades old. So if we see the segments, right, as you progress higher into the segments, you'll also notice that there's a certain higher willingness to pay for premium products. There's a respect, and like Narayan said, there's a value attributed to performance, there's a value attributed to design, there's a value attributed to, the kind of experience and excitement that you get owning the vehicle, right? And as a result of that, whether you look at IC vehicles or EVs, the premium ones, the companies have more room to innovate, more room to be sustainable, right? And the margins become better, right? And from that perspective, our choice of going into this segment of, higher performance, right, gave us more room to innovate and bring in the tech while at the same time being sustainable, from a gross margin perspective, from every vehicle that we sell, starting from the first unit that we sold, right? And that is something that is quite unheard of in EVs in most cases, especially if they're, lower end or utility vehicles.
So in terms of your operating business, you all are profitable already?
Yes, from the first unit that we sold, right? And that is something which, again, it was a plan 7 years in the making, right? And we realized that, the market may have its ups and downs, but as a company, we need to always stay sustainable.
And your investors must be very happy with you guys, huh?
I think
it's a long journey, right? Right now, the layers that we're talking about are extremely slim. Right now, if you look at an IC engine, there's a lot, that band is a lot wider in terms of gross margins. And so we are not there yet. But I think the endeavor is, as the industry matures, we ourselves will also find multiple ways to pull various levers and get to those points.
So the next bike you're working on is an adventure motorcycle, an electric adventure.
I didn't know.
Yeah, how did, I'm sorry, but
Well, you guys are jumping your regular bikes, which are sport bikes. You are taking it to the plantations in Chikmagalur or Coorg. So I think any half-assed journalist can figure out that what your next motorcycle is going to be. Is there a market for it? Nobody's done it in India.
Right.
In fact, nobody's done a performance electric motorcycle in India. So that's another question altogether. But what is the potential that you see over there?
So this actually didn't begin as a next product related question. It came from the fact of, back in 2019-20, when the campaign you're talking about is called Beyond Asphalt, where routinely we take the bikes to trying terrains to test out we are also curious to see what happens in those terrains. And I think the F99 has surpassed even some of our earlier fears and expectations, right? We've seen it on rocks, we've seen it in the beach, we've seen it in trails and tracks and whatnot. So the intent was to communicate to the larger world out there that electric is capable of anything an IC motorcycle can do. So it didn't originate from what are we going to do next as a product, but more as, while the F99 is definitely a a street or a road-oriented product, it is important to communicate that electric as a concept can do anything your gasoline vehicles can do. And that was the intent beyond asphalt.
In fact, when Narayan and the team had gone out on this project, right, I was actually quite worried and concerned because, those were the days where we had still limited prototypes and these vehicles, the first production batch of vehicles. And
Niraj was very clear, bikes have to come back functional. And I was not so...
Yeah, so we're looking at all of the data and these guys are just getting the bikes beaten up completely. And surprisingly, at the end of it, and while these motorcycles have been built to be robust, the kind of things that they were doing, right, on those rocky terrain and surfaces, they were doing these kinds of, stoppies and drops and all of this hundreds of times. It wasn't just 1 or, 10 or anything of that sort. So I had a feeling that the bikes are not going to come back in one piece, right? And surprisingly, all they came back with was a little bit of, plastic panel damage at the bottom. And the bikes are still functional to this day. There actually are on-road durability vehicles, right, which continue to cover miles and collect kilometers. And that was the intent of the project, right, to actually push the vehicle to its very limits.
So basically, you don't have to do too much engineering for your adventure electric motorcycles. You just style it well, style it differently, and you're good to go.
See, the market opportunity is across segments, right? Like we've seen the Indian market for IC motorcycles also evolve across segments.
Right.
So there's definitely an opportunity across.
We know there are four, 5 segments. There's cruisers, there's adventures, street motorcycle sports, scramblers, and some hybrid segments that have emerged of late. And I think it's fair to say we will be across these segments in the near future. But premature to get into exact specs there because our current goal is to establish distribution for Ultraviolette. And
obviously, your distribution needs to have motorcycles to pump out also, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So both go hand in hand, right?
Yes.
But is still your biggest challenge range? I come from the fact that, when I ride a motorcycle,
right,
I don't use it in the city. In the city, I use scooters. Right. Both of you all aren't fans of scooters, but in the city, I use a scooter. When I go out, I use a motorcycle.
Right.
Now, today, if I were to use any of your motorcycles, even your Recon, if I were to ride from Pune to Goa, for instance, I would need to stop at least twice, if not thrice, to juice it up.
Depends on the distance. Again, I'm not
500 kilometers.
Right.
So 200 kilometers.
You probably have to charge once. And if it's someone who's a little more worried about distance, probably has to do it twice. You're right with that.
But so coming back to my question, is range still the biggest obstacle to people adopting your motorcycle?
I don't think so, actually. I think we've solved that problem. In fact, with the range that is offered on the Recon, right? In fact, these are the largest battery packs that are there on two-wheelers in India, right?
Yes.
They are talking about 7 and 10 kilowatt hour, right? It's practically not possible to, make bigger battery packs and keep going in that route, right? And the kind of range that we offer, even the 320 plus kilometers IDC range, even from a realistic point of view on a highway, right, in excess of 200, 250 kilometers, this is quite, substantial in that sense. Of course, you can talk about, the psychological barrier that, people may have, which is that, can I do a highway trip? But all of these things, I think, are themselves getting, solved, right? The energy infrastructure is building out. We have customers, I think, like one of our customers from Chennai, Bala, right? He's a college professor who took the bike and went from Chennai to Ladakh and back in 20 days, right? And at that point, there was no infrastructure, right? He charged his vehicles from his bike from regular 15 amp outlets, right? Covering 7,000 kilometers.
So you're saying that customers aren't worried about range? They're not talking about range?
We've gone about it in a very structured way. Back in 2017-18, when development started to, get serious, this was, of course, our fundamental problem to solve. And we looked at it in three phases, right? 1, make charging portable. 2, how much juice can you give on the vehicle? And 3, how do you connect intercity riding? And today we've solved all of these 3, right? We offer 2 charger options, standard and the boost. With the boost, you can get up to 80% in under 2 hours. And both of them are portable. And what do I mean by portable? Not just the ability to carry them, which Niraj mentioned, Bala was able to carry the boost charger with him. And the other end is actually a 15 amp plug point. So you can stop at a dhaba, your friend's house, a garage. He was charging in service centers of other 4-wheeler dealerships. And we've made energizing on the go a real possibility to giving enough juice on the batteries. I mean, this is Asia's largest battery pack. Not getting into too much more detail. I think 250 to 300 plus kilometers on a real world riding cycles is sufficient to do most of your stop and go intercity riding. And third was what we launched midway last year, the Supernova charging network. Now, this was also important for exactly the use cases you're talking about. You stop for a lunch break, which is about 40 minutes to an hour at max. And we were trying to see how do we size our chargers and how do we back-end make the battery modules compatible from the BMS to the battery pack itself to absorb or fast-track absorption of energy, right? So today we've got two types of Supernova chargers, your 6 kilowatt and the 12 kilowatt. With the 12 kilowatt DC chargers, 40 minutes is all you need for an 80% top-up in charge.
What is the spread of your Supernova?
Today we are very well placed across Bangalore. So the way we're going about it is, again, we sort of represent the TG. So we relate one-to-one with what the customer use case is, what the owner groups are doing. We ourselves facilitate rides. So we've mapped out every tributary outside Bangalore that are the common riding points. So Bangalore, Chennai covered, Bangalore, Mysore covered, Bangalore towards Maharashtra is covered, Bangalore, Tumkur.
Towards Maharashtra till where?
I think we in fact have a point between Pune and Mumbai right now.
Okay.
So there is one live point. So if you're doing a Pune-Mumbai, of course, one charge is enough to do that, but there is already one point existing.
Now, I've always found this, I couldn't understand why can't you adapt your chargers, your connectors to use the existing charging network for cars? Because now your Supernova network, for instance, you have to invest a lot of your money into setting up this network. Today, Xeon Charge, ChargePoint, Tata Power, they're all setting up chargers for cars. All the Indian oil companies, all the PSUs are setting up charging networks. So why can't those networks be used for your motorcycles? The point I'm coming at is that your 15 amp thing that you're talking about, right? It's very common, but you don't want to go and beg, borrow, steal electricity, right? You want to go to a proper charging network and charging provider. So why can't it be made compatible with what is already there?
So there are actually 2-3 questions in there. So let's unpack it a little bit, right?
And dumb it down.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward in the sense that, for cars, it is very clearly established that now we have a charging standard which is called the Type 2 charging standard, right? And for two-wheelers, we have what is a Type 6 charging standard. Type 2 operates at higher voltages. It requires a lot more hardware on the vehicle side. Its communication protocol is different. And it's not very viable for two-wheelers considering the space and volume requirements. In fact, if you see a Type 2 charger and the DC combo also that it's included, it's quite large. It doesn't fit easily onto a two-wheeler, right? It's still, possible to fit it onto a large, like a motorcycle like ours, but it's very unlikely that it will scale downwards into smaller two-wheelers, right? So that's one important point. The same charging standard, the same connector standard, which is the IEC 62196 covers, which is a European and now a global standard. It also covers something called, a light electric vehicle standard, which is the Type 6 format, which is what is on our motorcycle today. It has also been adopted in India as part of the IS 17017 Section 2 Part 6 standard, which you told me to dumb it down, but I'm just taking up. But the point there is that Type 2 is for cars, Type 6 is for two-wheelers, and this is meant to be, usable on any type of two-wheeler and light electric vehicle, right? Now the next question is, does it make sense to, work on the Type 6 standard or go with the 15 amp socket, right? And even the 15 amp socket, today there are several companies like Bolt and, several of these companies which provide measured app-activated 15 amp sockets as well, right? And as we are one of the companies rolling out the Type 6 chargers, there's several such companies also rolling it out, and it's meant to be interoperable. It's not that, we are working on a proprietary network or charger that only will work for us.
Yeah, like your bike can be charged at an Ather grid, right?
Right. So they are, I think, using a Type 7 standard, but there are 3 other companies on a Type 6 standard.
So yours is not compatible with Ather.
So the connector that goes into the vehicle is a different...
Yes. It's still compatible probably on a software side. Eventually it will be, but I think what we're seeing is there is a convergence towards, Type 6, which was the original standard coming from Europe, and a Type 7, which is what I think Ather is using, right?
Okay.
So there's several companies now on the Type 6 bandwagon, as I would call it, and we are one of those, and we think that is the one that is likely to spread faster because it's a more universal standard.
So you're not going to move to Type 2?
Type 2 may not make sense for India from what we see. It is very specific to cars and it requires additional hardware and may not be practical. One other aspect which I didn't mention, which is that car charging, these connectors that are available, whether it's, any of the charging networks, the spots are limited. So if a motorcycle takes up that spot, right, it is also going to be inconveniencing other people, the car owners who come in for those, right? So it's a really...
It's not your headache.
I mean, it's not our headache, but, we know where this is headed, right? And we have to solve for that, right?
Yeah. But these 15 amp sockets, a lot of them are starting to get co-located with the car charging points as well.
Yes. In fact, they're measured. It's not that they're, not measured or not monetized and all of that. They're actually part of these networks.
So coming back to my range question, I know you're going to get fed up talking about this, but when you do an ADV bike, now I can understand for a road bike, you can go and find a 15 amp socket, right? When you go out into the mountains or into the jungles with your ADV, where are you going to charge?
Right. So, there's so many hypotheticals in this question. Since you've added in one whole layer, I will also add in there's a possibility of sunlight and solar charging. But I'm just, since we're joking, but see, I think the range question actually has to do more with people aren't afraid to take risks, right? It's actually people want to have the comfort and knowledge that everything's in control. There's a certain predictability that is expected, right? So the range estimation becomes the most important thing. And from our perspective, anyone who's going into that mode of, adventure or anything for that matter, right? We're doing a long distance trip. Predictability is important and that gives you comfort to take on these measured risks.
So, and in that edge case, I would also argue saying the electric grid is a little more ubiquitous than petrol stations. In those scenarios, you might find a point where there's a stall selling, Maggie, right? And that guy's going to have... But you might not find a petrol station in a 10-kilometer radius from there.
This actually happened, right? In Ladakh, I think the same customer, he encountered army camps where, there was electricity and he was charging it in places far beyond, what other motorable vehicles would have access to petrol bunks.
Yeah. A lot of car guys have also plugged their cars into 15 amp sockets and blew the entire shop's electricity. But obviously, you are not sucking so much from
Our chargers are also smart. They're able to recognize if the other side, the interface side of the infra is capable of supplying what you want, the quality of the power as well. And we're able to modulate, maintaining both safety of the bike and the other side at the same time.
So your motorcycles were never eligible for the FAME subsidies because you all are higher powered, bigger batteries and all of that. But from a larger industry perspective, do you think the government needs to do something for your industry to increase the penetration?
Yeah, I think, we have had benefits that have been coming to us because of, government policies. For example, there's 5% GST on electric vehicles. And this is across the spectrum, irrespective of the price. And that actually we benefit from that, or rather the customers benefit from that, right? That being said, I think even the cost of electricity in India is pretty low and it makes sense here. Specifically in terms of FAME subsidy, yes, it's not applied to our vehicles. There's been a price cap of ₹1.50,000. And we would really appreciate if that moved up, right? So the same would apply even for cars. I think it's capped to something below 20 lakh rupees. So from that perspective, I think the question that really comes up is it meant to make the lower end of the vehicles affordable and more affordable? Or is it meant to promote electric vehicles as a whole, right? Where there may be more vehicles which are higher performance or, more unique in that aspect. And that's a call that the government, I think, has taken.
But does the industry need government support still?
That's a tricky question, actually. So, in our opinion, I think industries only evolve if, the businesses are inherently capable of delivering products with minimal government support, right? The company has to be sustainable. The products have to make sense without too much of a push. And only then it's really competitive. So from that way, we've always built the company and we were aware of this. When we started the company in 2016, it's not like we were not aware of, the limitations of a subsidy. And we chose not to go down that path because the subsidies also mask the true reality that lies underneath, right? And only when the subsidies go away do you realize how the market is actually going to evolve, because the prices suddenly change.
Mm-hmm. So I want to get to the company, right?
Sure.
What is your business model like?
I mean, that's a very open-ended question. I mean, any particular aspect you...
So y'all are involved in the entire process, right?
Okay.
Right from design to engineering to manufacturing, right? So you cover everything. How much do you rely on outside sources?
I think the endeavor is to keep entire focus on the future technology, from the electric drivetrain and powertrain and experience part of it in-house. And of course, we very much work with a lot of partner and supplier companies in terms of the standard components on the motorcycles. For example, the manufacturing of tires, the shock absorbers, the
cycle parts.
Right. But when it comes to the powertrain, the batteries, the VCU, the motor, that entirely is the IP belongs to us. And I think, both of us took a conscious call on that right from day one, that if you have to build this particular segment, inherently technology becomes a moat. So it's not as easy for a new entrant in this space compared to a scooter space, right? And you've seen that there are a handful of motorcycle companies globally versus a few thousands of companies in that 3 to 8 kilowatt power band, right?
So in addition to what Narayan is saying, the other aspect is that when we're trying to build a full a product where the user experience really matters, right? It's very significant, the performance matters. It is actually a complex system, right? There are multiple subsystems, all need to communicate with each other, all need to operate in sync and operate flawlessly, right? That's an important part. So when such a system is being built out, it is essential to sort of vertically integrate to make sure that finally what the person who's riding the bike experiences is that full experience and there's not a single flaw there. And from that perspective, we had to get into every aspect of it, whether it's the design, whether it's the electronics, the power electronics, the charging, the software systems, the user interface. And if it is solved and done really well, that also means that, that's another moat. It's the barrier to entry is very high, right? It's what companies like Apple or Sony or Dyson have done, right? Where they've taken full ownership of the entire life cycle and actually built amazing consumer products.
If not, say you're sourcing a BMS from somewhere else and a motor controller from elsewhere, you're working with the limitations, you're trying to interface these components, and you're working with the limitations of what the manufacturer has offered to you. You're not able to further optimize efficiency across the performance and the optimization of energy itself across the board.
What's been the response like to the F77? I believe last year sold some 500 bikes, correct me if I'm wrong. Is that as per plan, or you still need to push harder?
No, I think the consumer response, I think you should actually get this independently as well. You'll notice that if you talk to the owners of our motorcycles,
and these are predominantly Bangalore. Today is when Pune went live, right? Yeah. So in the next 2 months, you'll see a lot more action. But the numbers you're talking about are mostly based out of Bangalore.
Yes. So the customers love their motorcycles, right? And that's sort of unanimous feedback. And it's not like, one person got a different experience or the 300 others got a different one. It's unanimous, right? And that is something that we have intentionally focused on, right? Because the kind of product that we're talking about, these are not, potatoes that, go out in at scale without, the entire ownership experience being considered. So it was an intentional choice. That being said, there's demand across the country, right? People have taken the bikes in Bangalore and shipped them themselves to other parts of the country, or have demanded that we be in other parts of the country, right? There's a bike that has reached Srinagar as well, right? And
so how does that happen? Do they buy it off your dealership in Bangalore and then take it themselves, or do you send it off?
So both have happened.
We've got now with the RTOs, we've got the certifications to sell in, I think, close to 20 states across the country. And if it belongs to any of these states, we facilitate a local registration. But if it is outside, then you have to take it out of Bangalore, and we facilitate the delivery process.
Okay. And what is your expansion plan?
Right. So even before the new stores and our space stations are all, they've been coming up, we actually had service available in multiple cities, right? In Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, Cochin, Pune, Mumbai as well, because we knew customers were bringing the bikes out here. and we wanted to make sure, the fundamentals are set up, right? And the same applied for Delhi as well, right? So we started to create service, and now is where we're expanding from a retail distribution standpoint, from a experience standpoint. We're expanding across India. And in the next 2 months, you'll see another 10 locations go live, and that's the plan.
Mumbai is going live next month. Cochin, Hyderabad, Chennai, Ahmedabad, Surat. I think 10 cities are going to go live rather quickly now.
So is this your own space stations, or is this like dealer partners? How are you going to be operating this?
So it's a combination of both. Pune, Bangalore, Mumbai currently are going to be operated by the company, but we are also working with dealer partners in multiple cities. I think the endeavor has been to, one, lay a very solid foundation of what the consumer experience needs to be. One was getting it right for the home city, which we've done in Bangalore. Two, Pune and Mumbai are part of getting that template right, or some learnings are also going to come in the way of how do you scale it that to a city beyond Bangalore. Now, once this is live, I think we have a solid foundation that are going to be executed at scale with dealer partners. And also important to find the right partner to work with. In some places, it is people that have a strong experience and foothold in the industry already. In some places, it is entrepreneurs that love the brand and want to do everything in their part to work in collaboration to spread awareness and sales as well.
So you still need a brick and mortar retail outlet even today, because I'm looking at Tesla. Tesla, they don't want it, they don't need it, they haven't had it, right? But in India, you still need that?
Yeah, I think it is not a business that just scales online, right? Discoverability can happen online, where people discover the brand and they're curious, right? But the next stages of consideration and, understanding the product have to happen offline. And that often involves a test ride to get a sense of that, accelerating performance, right? And there's only so much you can simulate all of that online, right? So it really needs to happen on the ground.
And it's a very visceral experience, right? And that feeling of when you fall in love with something, when you see it in front of you. I mean, you've been in this industry. What do you think when it comes to desirable products?
So to me, I would, if I'm buying anything, I might order it online, I might do it, but
right.
A car or a motorcycle, I would like to first go and have a look at it, touch it, feel it, ride it, drive it.
Right.
Enjoy that whole experience of getting delivery, because that's a huge part of the memories.
It's a milestone in people's lives, right?
In anybody's life, right?
Yes.
So a lot of car manufacturers, they offer you the facility the car will be sent home. You don't have to ever go to the dealership. But I think 85 or 90% of people still go to the dealership because they like that bringing the coconut, all of that. We Indians have that thing with us, right? Culturally,
we are expressive, right? We are not as clinical as maybe some of the other cultures that we're talking about where this model works. And again, you mentioned a couple of brands that are doing this, but if you still look at the brands where design, performance come together, like a Porsche, a Lamborghini, these brands, the physical experience is a very important part of yearning for it, saving for it, purchasing it.
So this has not been a pivot for you, but you've always had plans for a brick and mortar outlet.
Yes, very much. We always knew that it's a premium product, and there's parts of it that are online, but the rest of it is actually offline.
One additional point here, though, is we may not require the distribution that the legacy two-wheeler companies perhaps have to have in place today. If you look at any of the incumbents, each city has multiple two-digit touch points, right? I think what we are looking at is, of course, be more efficient in how we get the word out. So communication can happen digitally, awareness can happen digitally, but fulfillment can be a smaller number of touch points, but it is still a very important factor that we need to have in place.
So our model actually is very inverted if you look at it and compare it to a typical ICE vehicle. And the reason I say that is because it's more of a pull from the consumer or the potential buyer, and not a sort of hard push to be as close and sell as many vehicles in that sense. It's actually the other way around. For example, we're here in Pune today, right? The store opened today. But there are actually 80 vehicles that are in Maharashtra, right? And those are consumers or buyers who came to Bangalore or, had their vehicles shipped here even before the store went live, right? So that's the kind of demand, right? And a lot of them are now excited that the store's also here, right? So it's a more demand-based, a pull-based sort of model where aspiration is built up even before we get to a particular place. And the way that we're looking at it, we've identified about 50 cities globally where we need to have a presence. And these are the 50, first locations where we'll, start to have this.
So your global expansion, I was going to touch upon that,
Right.
is going to be in the similar model where you'll have your own stores and you'll have franchise partners?
I think, yeah.
It's going to be a hybrid. If you look at Europe, for instance, some of the legacy automakers have standalone stores, but you also have car malls, you have co-located spaces where multi-brand outlets are in vogue. So the behavior there is evolving into a purchase model where I want to go to a store, check out 4-5 brands, make an educated call in that time-optimized manner. So it's going to be a combination of both in Europe.
So let's talk about global expansion.
Right.
You made announcements for it last year at the EICMA.
Yeah.
This year, you're going to kick it off?
Yes.
I hope so.
Yes.
Right.
And we're also going to be at EICMA. So, yeah.
So where does it start with? And when does it start, the global expansion?
I think this month in August is where it actually starts. In fact, some of our motorcycles have already crossed the shores, as to put it that way. They're in Europe and in some parts of Asia as well. Right, and people have been riding these motorcycles in controlled environments, and we have been undergoing or going through, the certification process all the way since last June or July, right? From a factory certification point of view, from a shipping of batteries and safety in terms of advanced batteries for storage, transport. All of those are complete, and we're just about to finalize, the final vehicle roadworthiness. So I think we're just a couple of weeks away from some important and big announcements.
Niraj is putting it all very calmly. You asked us before we got started what keeps us busy these days.
Yep.
The last 12 months, this has been a very big chunk of what's been keeping us busy, and wasn't so much calmness in some of those days.
How difficult is it to export?
I think, it depends on where you're exporting to, right? Typically, companies in India have been exporting to, let's say, third world markets or other countries.
Like Africa, South America.
Yeah.
America.
So some of these places, the regulations are more, let's put it as, they're not so strict, or the regulations sometimes are very much to do with localization, in which case it's a hard problem to solve. But what we are talking about is actually shipping to first world countries, where the expectations on quality, where the expectations on durability, where the expectations on, consistency and safety, right? As well as even recycling. All of these matter. In fact, all of our supply chain partners, over 150 suppliers, had to be compliant before we can, ship these vehicles out to Europe. So it's actually quite a tedious process with a lot of paperwork. And, the vehicles have been built for this from the get-go, but there are a lot of processes involved to getting it certified.
Is the Indian certification and homologation very different from what you would find in Europe?
I think from a, functional point of view, they're very similar to some level, because, some of the Indian standards are also adapted from EC standards as they're known, right? Especially to do the newer ones, which have to do with batteries and, electrical systems. However, there is, a divergence that happens when you talk about transport or, more advanced requirements in terms of recycling, etc. Right? So there are Indian regulations functionally do the job very similar, but there are aspects of ownership and, selling these vehicles commercially that Europe is more stringent about.
And you need to retest all of these parameters again. The reports from the previous test don't apply here. So it's a new cycle altogether. And
you've certified the F77, obviously, right? What's happening with the F99?
So the F99, we'll share more details with you in the coming days. It's already formed a very strong R&D test base for us. Of course, the intent with the F99 is to get the ultraviolet race platform up and running. And what it's done, we're dealing with 100 kilowatts of performance, and we solved regen on that vehicle platform, and that helped us fast track 10 levels of regen on the F77, right? And that surge current that goes back, which is doing that instantaneous fast charging on the vehicles and getting all the parameters in place to accommodate battery safety in those crucial moments was very critical for us. And I mean, when you talk about electric powertrains, charging and discharging both represent the same kind of stress on the battery packs. So we've already seen advancements like that. We've seen influences of aerodynamics, approach to aerodynamics coming in from there to the F77, and the fact that we've had no visible nuts or bolts, streamlining the vehicles. Functionally, I think the regen was one really big milestone for us that came in from.
So motorsport is already proving to be a test bed for your next technologies without
definitely.
you even going to the racetrack yet.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we've been going to the racetrack secretly, not so secret anymore, but I think it's always been that way. The F99 actually started as a project which was to push the limits of, where the technology can take us, right? And it was meant to be a race platform. And from there, there's always this, question from the engineers who are working on it as to, how much of this can we also bring into the F77? How much of this can we quickly, commercialize, because this is so cool, right? And the 10 levels of regen is one of those.
It's a fully independent autonomous team as well that we have in the company. So when you look at problem solving already with a commercial objective, you would involve sourcing, supply chain, manufacturing, and get all of these people to buy into or, sign off on requirements. And then you go with what is possible to do given your budget constraints, timeline constraints, access to tech and suppliers, etc. But when you take on a challenge which does not have commercial implications, then you go all out to try and solve it to prove tech, right? Then once that is proven, if we find out of 5 things that got proven, 1 or 2 have really, really serious commercial benefits, then we do everything in our might to then push the other way around. That, guys, we have this tech, now everybody else, let's come together and figure out a way to make it into commercial production.
In fact, just to add to this, the F77 project also started the same way, right? Which was, can we have a performance motorcycle in this segment when nobody else had one, right? And at that point, it seemed very outrageous. The suppliers also told us, no, we don't have something that can meet your requirement, right? And we went on building version after version and then worked with suppliers once we ourselves had the comfort to say that this is possible, right? So that's part of the DNA of the company, and whether it's the F77 or the F99, right, it's always part of it. So I think
one example is the battery tech on the F77. When we started the company in 2016, we spent time in the US, spoke to Tesla owners, understood the tech, understood the ownership aspects. We looked at how companies like Gogoro are operating different business models where you separate battery and the vehicle. And our assumption or thesis then was, let's do 100 miles of range, right? So it's 3 digits in overseas markets. In India, it's 150, 160 kilometers, right? And by the time it took us about 4 or 5 years, 2019 is when we unveiled the vehicles for the first time. And we got a lot of feedback that by then, the expectation from the consumer side had also gone higher in terms of range. So people started saying, guys, okay, 140, 150 is cool. Can we at least get to 200? So then we suspended everything on R&D. I think company at that point was about 40 people.
This was also the COVID time where we knew we can't go into production. And we went back to the drawing board and, said, what is the hardest problem to solve now, right? And the question was, okay, now we are at 150 kilometers. Can we get it to 200, right? And once we are getting closer, it also became, how much can we get out of this battery pack, right? Now, again, it became an outrageous objective. Can it go to 50? Can it go 300? And that's the project that again started.
And then someone from the tech teams or somebody would say, guys, theoretically, I can get 280. Theoretically, we can get 300. And then, like, okay.
And one person says that out loud, and then everyone's jumping on to that, saying that, okay, you said it, now let's try it out, right? And that's how we ended up at 323 kilometers of range, which is why we think, it's kind of a solved problem. We keep coming back to that, right? Which is, it's quite outrageous to put so much of, energy into one place and actually build an EV with that kind of range.
So when do we see the race series actually happening?
I think quite soon. Right now,
this year?
On our bandwidth, this year you will definitely get some updates. Our bandwidth is maxed out today with distribution and international, both India and international happening parallelly. So we want to, like Niraj mentioned, from a communication perspective, from a brand perspective, we want things to come out in the right way and form. We don't want to rush something while 3 other things are going on in parallel. So definitely some things are going to be happening soon, but in a way where we can put focused energy behind it.
One of your biggest investors is TVS Motor Company. They already have an electric race bike. Are you guys collaborating in terms of technology?
I think their project is quite independent from us. I mean, we're happy and excited that they also have a electric racing project, and we've got our own F99 racing platform as well. So we'll love to,
I mean, the more players in the performance space launching commercial products or race oriented, I mean, the world of electric needs more racing oriented products as well. Need not all match commercial objectives. From that aspect, we were super thrilled to see brands like TVS also getting into. They've got a long racing heritage anyway on the IC platforms. Now, them getting into the EV space was also very encouraging, not just for enthusiasts, but for the industry at large.
And TVS also has their big electric scooter, the X.
Right.
It's not been easy going with the X, but I believe you guys were also involved in the development of some part of the X.
No, I mean, I'd like to emphatically say very independent R&D. Full credit to the TVS team for the X project. We were not involved in any way or form.
So a big scooter like that, wouldn't that be like a good extension of what you guys are doing with motorcycles? I know you don't want to get into the commuter segment,
sure,
right? But like a more premium motorcycle, premium scooter, would that be of interest?
So I think our approach and what our belief is, the market in India is still evolving, right? Especially around, the segments that you mentioned, right? Premium scooters. While there are other markets in Southeast Asia where premium scooters are already a thing, right? If you go to Taiwan, you go to, other parts of Southeast Asia.
Yeah. Honda 300, 350s are the norm there, right? And
right, even in the Middle East and Europe, right? All of these markets have very powerful or, premium scooters. We haven't yet seen that in India, and a few companies are making, products to meet those requirements. So we're watching and, we're excited about the possibilities. In fact, last week there's a scooter launched at 14 lakhs, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Like, I mean,
is it awesome?
I mean, that segment is opening up, right?
The segment, I mean,
Yeah, but if somebody sells 2 motorcycles, right, or 2 scooters, that's not really opening up a segment, right? That's more like shutting the segment forever.
I believe like a company of that scale should find ways to engineer both financially and technology, both to, sort of meet the segment expectations. But what was interesting was that product is present in India, which opens up a new segment.
Yeah. Right, which was never the case, right? A lot of companies, global companies, would never bring their, top-end vehicles to India, and they will always delay that, right? So first, the idea of bringing it to India at whatever maybe the price point, I think that's a good choice. I mean, of course, beyond that, it has to make commercial sense.
What it also does is it exposes the customers or the world to what qualities are expected as well. So I think if there are features and if there are other tech aspects available in products that are coming into the space, it's also at large going to help the industry, move faster towards offering that as well.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you for making time. Really appreciate it. And all the best with your network expansion, with your going international, with your motorsport. So lots on the plate, and we're really looking forward to seeing how it evolves and how it progresses. And thank you guys for watching. If you have any more questions, drop it in the comments. We'll get Neeraj and Narayan or their teams to answer that. And of course, let us know who we should be talking to next on the Evo India podcast. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to stay subscribed to the Evo India channel.